Hi everyone, welcome to tonight's seminar. I think we're talking about the Bsmd program, and I'm Allison, and I have three of the Bsmd students with me today, Jonathan, John V, and Michael. If you guys can give a quick wave. All right. Today's seminar, we're doing this today to fundraise money for Kathy's Fun Fitness Dance. So this is for a lot of our parents, I think, and a lot of other people here who enjoy having this as, I guess, their fitness activity of choice. And there's a lot of people who I think use this also as a social opportunity just to enjoy having another opportunity to get around and do something fun with everyone. And so what we would really appreciate is if people would be willing to donate tonight towards this program, because it is, I guess, a really fun time for everyone who has been involved with this, and earning some money today would be really, really helpful for them, because right now, I mean, what with hosting Zoom and hosting these sessions, there's just a lot of, I guess, costs that go into this, and it helps everyone here enjoy and have a lot of fun time. And that way, you know, we're doing this event tonight, so that way, hopefully, whatever kids here who are in high school or maybe younger even and thinking about doing the Bsmd program, they get some helpful information. And if it helps out them, maybe then you guys can donate towards all the moms and all the other people here who are having a good time dancing. The donation info is all here. So if you guys are interested in joining also, for people who don't, I guess, participate in this program, then it's a great opportunity to also join. So today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about what is a Bsmd program for those of you who don't know, and how you prep for these to get in, what the application process is like, and then we're going to interview our three students here tonight who will hopefully shine some light on what the process of being a Bsmd student is like, and also the, I guess, benefits and also bad parts about this program can be. So there are a few different pathways for this program in terms of getting into medical school in general. So the first and standard pathway is one that most people are familiar with, is which you are pre-med in college, whether that means you're a bio major or something else more specific. You take the MCAT, and then you attend medical school after the completion of your undergraduate degree. Then there's also the special master's degree programs, which are 1- and 2-year programs. And they can confer a master's degree in medical sciences, but they are a little bit different. Anyway, let's keep going. And then there's the accelerator program we're going to talk about tonight, which is either a BS or a BA, and then you have an MD combined within one program. And there are about 40 of them, but some of these are only for people who live within those states. So you should be aware when you are applying to take a look at these. And then finally, there's an MD PhD program, which is a little bit more research focused from what I know. But more questions about that can be reserved for later when we talk to our three people here. So in terms of if you are a high school student or not, and you're taking a look at these programs, what's important first and foremost is in terms of your unweighted GPA to hopefully have it around 4.0 or higher. In terms of weighted GPA, I'd assume somewhere around 3.8 or higher would probably be a good range. In terms of your standardized testing, 1500 for the SATs, 34 or higher for the ACT. So generally good standardized testing scores. They would like to see you in AP or IB classes, whatever is offered available, and be within the top 10% of your school. In terms of what meaningful experiences are that they would look for in your application, things like research programs in terms of STEM and other STEM programs like that are very helpful in your application, whether that means joining someone's lab and doing some random research there, or finding some high school like internship programs that would allow you to do research in a lab. Those are probably pretty important. Other than that, there's also community service programs where you can volunteer at hospitals or nursing homes, or you can tutor other kids at community centers or volunteering at free clinics. I think in general, volunteering and community service programs look very good on your applications to these. In terms of other clinical exposure opportunities, shadowing any doctors or surgeons that you know of would be a very good chance to not only look good on your application, but to also give yourself an understanding of what it's like within the clinical setting to begin with. I know for myself, if I was in a hospital, I probably would not enjoy it. So I think it's important to know what you would like to do too. Other than that, volunteering in like hospices or nursing homes is another great chance to interact with patients and to understand what I guess you would be doing on a day-to-day basis as a doctor. In terms of extracurriculars, math and debate look good. There are also science Olympiads that you can do, whether that's the Bioscience Olympiad or just the National Science Olympiad program in general. Competitive programs such as those look very good for your application. Also other kinds of more fun extracurriculars like instruments, acting, playing sports, things like that. Those all look relatively good on your application. But in general, being able to stand out, I think, is another thing, to have something that you're just good at. So in terms of the pros or cons, so these are some of the things that I think are good and bad about doing a Bsmd combined medical program. So you don't need to apply to medical school after your BS, which is very nice. It takes off a lot of the stress, I think, within that final year of your school, of not having to just get good grades, but to also get good applications out there. And it gives you this, I guess, straightforward path that you can take. Finally, you do get a good community that you can immerse yourself with. All the other kids in your program you get to be very good friends with, and it does shorten the experience by an entire year sometimes if you do a 7-year program, which can be very nice, especially if for those of you guys who are out there and thinking that it's already going to be a lot of school that you have to go through. So the issues with this is you do have a lot of commitment. As a high school student, you need to know that you want to be a doctor and that you're going to be okay with being a doctor at the end of this, because the worst part is you get into this program, you commit maybe 3-4 years of your life in this program and realize you don't want to be a doctor at the end of the day. And you are going to be in the same location. Usually the schools are linked together. So for example, for John V and Jonathan, who they went to RPI in Albany and then they go to Albany Med School. That's one thing. And doesn't offer a ton of flexibility in what curriculum you can take. And the other thing is, it may not be your ideal college experience, whether it's a smaller school or something like that. Maybe you wanted to go to a big school with, 30,000 kids. That might not be possible. So those are just a few things, and you can find out more when you ask out questions from these guys. And then finally, this is the application process. I'm not entirely sure if this looks very different from your standard college experience application anymore. It's been a little while for me, and I think for the rest of you guys. But this information is helpful to have, and I think ideally the slide deck will be sent to everyone after for them to review this information. But let's just get to the more interesting part, which is talking about our 3 people here. So if you guys would go ahead and unmute yourself and give a quick introduction, starting from Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Bao. I'm going to be a 3rd-year medical student starting this week, actually. But I went to the RPI AMC Bsmd program. So that's a 7-year program. And in terms of what I'm interested in pursuing medicine, I am interested in pursuing, hopefully, neurosurgery.
Hi, everyone. My name is John V. I'm from Ohio. I also went to RPI for undergrad, and now I'm at Albany Med School, and I'm about to be a 3rd year as well. And in terms of specialty, right now I'm trying to decide between pediatrics and neurology.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michael Tram. I'm from Irvine, California. I'm going to be a 2nd year at Albany Med next year. I went to Siena for undergrad. Siena's about 15 minutes away from Albany, and like 20 minutes away from RPI. In terms of specialty, I'm thinking about something surgical. And then I think one other thing I would mention is in high school, I probably applied to almost all the Bsmd programs, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and open it up to Q&A. So I have a prepared list of questions, and then after that, or as you guys have questions, go ahead and pop them into the chat and I will read through them as we talk to each of our students here. So first and foremost, when did you guys decide to pursue a medical career and why? Was it because of the influence of your family members or something else?
I can go first. So for me, none of my family members actually are in medicine. My parents actually were more involved in the research side of sciences. But eventually they both transitioned out of those careers. So it was, of course, having parents who were in the sciences definitely helped. But in terms of really what kind of solidified the influence for me was I think reading kind of articles and books about medicine, and that kind of intrigued me at the time. And I really kind of, for me, the most formative experiences kind of happened during high school, but I had the inkling of an idea. I wanted to be a doctor starting about in elementary school, and during middle school, I remember writing in my yearbook actually that I wanted to be a surgeon when I was in middle school. So something that's been kind of part of my life for a while. But as I mentioned, the most formative experiences definitely happened during high school when I was able to shadow some of the a neurosurgeon actually, and that experience in itself is the reason why I ultimately decided to choose medicine and why I'm pursuing the field that I want to pursue.
Yeah, so for me, so when I was a kid, my mom went through a pretty serious health crisis. So just seeing that and how it affected her and basically everyone in my family, it was kind of something that was in the back of my mind growing up. And then, yeah, similar to Jonathan, I really thought about it seriously, I guess, in high school, through more experiences with shadowing and everything like that. Gaining more exposure to the field helped me solidify my decision.
As for me, I grew up sort of like surrounded by medicine. My dad is a doctor. My mom's a dentist, and so I had that exposure early on. I didn't write in my yearbook though. I didn't anything like Jonathan, but I swear that there's like a photo from one of my earlier Halloweens in which my parents dressed me up as a doctor. So that may have played a role into influencing me a little bit. So yeah, I was exposed to it as a child. I saw my dad go to work. I went in to work with him, saw what he did. And so I would say like I always thought I was going to become a doctor. Never really crossed my mind about any other careers. And yeah, that's the path I've been on ever since.
All right. In terms of what activities you did in terms of high school, what did you do to try to build your portfolios, and what made you stand out apart from others on your applications?
So I feel like the three main themes that most Bsmd applicants have is some form of shadowing. Like you need to show that you've seen what medicine is like, so you can make like a career commitment out of high school. So for me, that was shadowing. And then the second thing is some form of like scholarly activity, like a research. I worked at like a research lab at UC Irvine. And then the third thing that I found was common in a lot of applicants was some form of service, like volunteering, community service, things to show like a side of compassion. And so within those things, as long as like you show a sort of like dedication and passion towards it, and actually it's not like a checkbox kind of thing. You find something that you actually like doing and you can talk about it, that shines through in your application.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going along that, I kind of followed a similar structure. But I think for me, I was particularly interested in neuroscience in high school. So I kind of tried to make everything, all the extracurricular activities I did related to that. So like for research, I worked in a lab that studied the genetics of Alzheimer's disease. And then for volunteering, I also volunteered at an Alzheimer's nursing home, and also as a first aid team member. Yeah, so I guess like one thing that helped me stand out was just like finding something within medicine that I was passionate about, and for like, I guess, choosing my activities based on that.
Yeah, I agree with both Michael and John, you said. And then there's a question in the chat I saw that was mentioning about, is there a certain number of hours to show your dedication? And I mean, it's hard to put a number on it. I'll put it straight up. It's like, but I think, of course, you have to commit a certain amount of time. I would say, to give you a ballpark of what I was doing at the time, I shadowed clinically for about 100 to 200 hours. Volunteering at a hospital-wise, it was closer to 500 hours. And then for research-wise, that was just one of the biggest components of my application. That's why I ultimately ended up going to this RPI Bsmd program, which is actually heavily focused on research, is I spent over 1,000 hours doing research during high school. So that's something, like, again, it's very tailored depending on what you're applying to, but again, it's very, very hard to put a very hard cutoff on, you need X number of hours, because everybody's experience is a little bit different. Opportunities across the nation are also very, very different depending on the region as well. So it's hard to put on that. But again, it is very kind of three-pronged approach, where you have research, you have some form of a service or volunteer, or some form of clinical hours as well.
Also, one thing I will add about shadowing, a problem that I ran into in high school was that a lot of the big hospitals had a lot of regulations in terms of letting people under 18 be exposed to patients. So one thing that I did was reach out to some smaller clinics, and I found that I had more success getting into those for shadowing. So yeah, if you're having trouble getting shadowing, I would reach out to some of the smaller clinics.
One thing I will say about shadowing, like John V said, I shadowed in like a health system that didn't have that many regulations. Like I didn't have to do any trainings. There wasn't like a wait list to get a position. I connected with a doctor by reaching out to him. But one thing I want to share is that I was able to get a letter of rec from that doctor I shadowed. And I think that that was a very huge addition to my application, because that doctor was able to say something along the lines of Michael knows like what it's like to be a doctor, and he understands the commitment, and it's like a good fit for him, something like that. I feel like having a doctor vouch for you is a very strong addition, especially coming out of high school, when a lot of high school students don't have that kind of experience of shadowing or working in like healthcare.
In terms of number of activities you guys did, do you think it is quality over quantity, or do you think having a lot of activities looks good?
In general, I would say like quality over quantity, as long as you're not, I guess, missing any major area. Like as long as you have some sort of research, some sort of volunteering. I think like, yeah, I guess like I only really worked in one lab. I think some people like try to work in multiple labs throughout high school. So I think that definitely helped me to just like narrow it down and focus on one thing.
Got it. We can keep going. Do you guys want to share a little bit more about your research? Some people in chat are asking about that, and let's talk about, I guess, what are the challenges about the research you're doing? Did you guys have any issues with selecting a field of research that was like more interesting to you? And were there many frustrations that came along the way because of that?
I can start with that one. So research experience, again, it's very heavily variable. I grew up in Southern California, so I grew up in San Diego. And so San Diego is one of the biotech hubs in all the United States. So they have opportunities in general for students, but again, it is very, very difficult. I remember during my freshman and sophomore year of high school, I was interested in starting some research. So I actually emailed about 35 faculty members at UCSD at the time. I didn't get a single response. I actually got 2 responses. Both of them were basically just, no, you're too young. Why are you emailing me now? It's like, so it's very hard to find individuals who will mentor high school students. But I was very, very fortunate in that San Diego does have a program. It's called, back in the day, it was called LSSI, Life Sciences Summer Institute. It was basically a high school summer internship that a lot of San Diego students applied to. And it partnered with Scripps Research, Salk Institute, UCSD, and a bunch of other institutes in the area that were willing to sponsor high school students and teach them and train them as the next generation of scientists and physician scientists as well, which was, I got so lucky. I mean, they only select about 40 people a year, and I mean, they receive hundreds of applications, and it was again, very, very fortunate. And because of that, I was introduced to my research experience through that, starting after my junior year in the summer, that summer. So I spent about 10 weeks researching that summer, and because of how like I was doing some work, and the PI was again very, very grateful to allow me to stay during the school year, during senior year as well, and actually even pay me. So I mean, it's again a lot of fortunate circumstances helped me out in that instance. But I think the biggest thing is you have to find someone who's really willing to mentor you in your projects. I mean, there's so many different fields. You have to find something that you want to do, because as a high schooler, you're going to have a lot of challenges. People are going to ask you, why are you doing this as a high school student? And it has to be something you want to do. If you're kind of just doing it as a checklist, it is difficult to kind of prove why you want to do it. If you're just kind of doing it just for, let's say, oh, I want to apply to these programs, so I'm just going to force myself to do this. It's kind of that, in that sense, it's something you have to want to do.
Yeah, so oh, sorry, Michael, you're gonna go? Oh. So yeah, so I grew up in Ohio, near Ohio State, which, if you don't know, that's like one of the biggest schools in the country. So it's pretty hard to get into labs there, since they're just like inundated with all of the college students there. So yeah, I emailed a bunch of professors at Ohio State and didn't really get much of a response. So I was able to get research through like some of those summer programs they have. So if you just like search online for like high school summer research programs, a bunch should come up. The one I did was at Boston University. So I was there for the summer between my junior and senior year. And it's not paid, and you do have to pay to live there, like for living expenses and everything. So that's could be like kind of a barrier. But I definitely had a great experience there. Like I mentioned earlier, I worked in a lab that studied the genetics of Alzheimer's disease. And I think the reason I was able to get into that program was that I had previously done a lot of neuroscience related activities. Like I used to do this competition called the Brain Bee, which is basically just a neuroscience competition for high school students. And it has like different levels. So I was able to compete at the national level before applying to the research program. So I think that helped show that I like, one, am like knowledgeable about neuroscience, and two, am interested in it. So I think that helped me get that.
So I started research the summer between my junior and senior year. Like John V and Jonathan, I basically went on UC Irvine's faculty list for the Department of Biology, and then I just cold emailed every single professor, and I was fortunate I got one response. I basically was working with one of the PhD students in the lab, helping her with her project. I was doing all the pipetting and the PCR. So all of like the sort of like the most basic types of lab tests that you can run. And I felt like that was appropriate for like what I knew, like in reality, a lot of these professors can go find a traditional pre-med student from undergrad who has probably more training than a high school student. But, I went in, I was eager to learn, and that helped. And so I think that was enough in terms of research for applying to Bsmd programs. I didn't have to have my own project. I think what was important is that I knew I could explain what I was working and why I was running all these, PCR tests. I was working on a project looking at long non-coding RNAs. So I could explain what our aim was, like that. And that kind of shows that you're involved with the research, you know what you're doing. You're not just like in there because like, I don't know, like you're not in there and just like not really doing anything. You're actually involved, and you're actually dedicated, and you're interested. And what else? Another thing that helped me out was that I was able to also get a letter of recommendation from the PI in the lab. I think that was also a good addition for my application.
Cool. So let's go into your shadowing experience. I think we had one question about that earlier. What, I guess, was the most interesting to you about the shadowing experience? How did you guys get those experiences? Things about that line of questioning, I guess.
So for me, I shadowed a primary care physician, and it was in a kind of a rural area near my hometown. And it's a pretty small town, like the kind of town where everyone knows everyone. So I thought it was really cool to see the connections that he had with his patients, because like, I guess everyone in that town was so interconnected. So that was really interesting for me to see. And I actually used to go there every week for a full summer. I would go like 1 day a week. So I really got to experience a lot of it. And I would definitely recommend, like, if you find like one physician that allows you to shadow them, to try to go several times so that you can get a better feel for it and also build a connection with that physician.
In terms of shadowing, so I know the question asked when you shadow, and so it really depends. Summer is for sure the best time to shadow. You have the most time, depending on what other extracurricular activities you're involved in. It's definitely something that you can fit into your schedule, because most physicians operate Monday through Friday, right? And during the school year, you're kind of like, you're in school, you have to kind of attend all your classes. So it is a little bit challenging, but it again depends, because it depends on the hours of the physician and everything like that, and also your other commitments. But in terms of finding shadowing opportunities, the only real way of doing it, as long as you don't have family or friends who are physicians, is to cold email or find somehow some small connection to them. For me, I was cold emailing neurosurgeons, and I happened to email a neurosurgeon whose daughter went to my high school. So that small connection helped bridge the gap for me. And he had a history of taking on high school students to at least expose them to the field and show them what the kind of reins are for a doctor. And so for me, that was very, very fortunate. But I did most of my shadowing during that summer between junior and senior year, actually. So essentially what I would do is that I was working 9 to 5 or during my research internship, and then after 5 I would go to shadow him, actually, because he was doing surgery. His hours were definitely much more I would say like not normal. So a lot of times he would have surgery scheduled at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., depending on how busy his day was, and also if he was on call. So I would just text him and say, hey, I'm free. Can I come over and shadow? And he'd respond, let me know, like, oh, I'm here doing this surgery, come through, or something like that. And so that was, again, very helpful. And then also, depending on how my free time worked out, I would also go to his clinic, just go see patients as well and see how the overall interaction went. So that's something that, again, is very fortunate. But I think when you find the right physician that is willing to show the reins to a high school student, is something that you can get as an experience through high school. It just takes a little bit of persistence to email. And again, don't feel discouraged when someone doesn't respond to you. Physicians have that tendency to not respond to emails either at all or very quickly. Sometimes it can take weeks to months to even get a response from them. So just don't feel discouraged and keep on emailing. And that's the really best way to get a hold of someone if you don't know anybody who's already a physician.
Yeah, very similar to Jonathan and John V. One of the physicians I shadowed was just like a cold email, but a different physician that I shadowed was actually one of the doctors that worked at the nursing home I volunteered at. And so I ran into him during one of my shifts, got to know him, and I asked him, like, hey, are there any opportunities to come shadow? And luckily there was. And so I was able to get the opportunity through that. And so there are a bunch of different ways to find physicians to shadow. You need to keep your eyes open, and try just take every shot you can. It's okay if you get rejected and nothing happens. It's okay if they ignore you or they say no. But you just need one person to take you on, and then you're good to go.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing a lot of questions about, I guess, just the general basics of your program and what differentiates them. Do you guys want to explain a little bit about, I guess, what the difference is between, I guess, Michael's program versus John V and Jonathan, your twos, and also what you mean in terms of like that RPI's Bsmd is a little bit more research focused. And can you guys talk a little bit more about, I guess, why you chose to go with the route you did and why you chose the school that you did too?
Okay, yeah, this is a very a lot. It's gonna be a lot, so I'm gonna have to. So for in terms of the first question, which was the differences between the programs, so Albany Medical College is very unique in that it has multiple filler, like not filler, but feeder schools into Albany Med. So there's technically three main programs, but there's actually four total, I believe. So the three main programs all have different emphasis. So the three emphases is business in medicine or leadership in medicine. The other one is the physician scientist program, which is what the one RPI is with. And then there's also the service in medicine, which is what Michael's program with Siena does. So each of them has their own different focus. The other sorry, my friend mentioned the business one is actually through Union College. And so Union and Siena's program are both 8 years, while RPI's program is 7 years. I won't go into detail about Michael's program. I'll let him talk more about it, but I'll talk more about RPI and Union. I'll go through Union first. So Union's program is the leadership in medicine. So they focus on the more of the business aspect of medicine, how it overlaps together. So they're trying to create someone who's versatile and maybe potentially can help fill roles in leadership and executive boards in medicine later on. And so these students actually, so during their 4 years at Union, they get a bachelor's and also get an MBA before they come into med school. So it's a very interesting kind of focus on how they do their medicine, and also they also study a lot about healthcare systems. And then the RPI program is a little bit different in that we do 3 years of undergrad and then 4 years of medical school. And our program's focus is very heavily on research. That's why it's called the physician scientist program. And so for this program, again, each kind of it depends on all the other BSMD programs out there, but RPI is the only one I know of that is very, very heavily focused on research. Everything else is kind of more balanced, except for the Siena, which is more service, and Union, which is more business. But in terms of RPI's physician scientist program, structure wise, 3 years of RPI, we don't actually technically graduate from college yet. So our first year of medical school kind of courses transfer back to our to RPI to help us graduate. So we graduate after our first year of medical school. And so it's a little bit a different kind of way of doing things. And as I mentioned, it's more research focused. So the courses we take and also the kind of structure of the program really pushes you to focus and develop your ability as a scientist. So during our last year at RPI, there's a required course that we are required to take. There is writing an NIH grant, and also starting our MDDR thesis, which is stands for medical degree with distinction in research. So it's kind of a distinction track that Albany Med offers, and it's something that RPI students are heavily encouraged to do because we start doing research during our third year, and so people are like, it's kind of what we're being encouraged to do. And as we go on, we also have more support through that. We have summers required to do research at Albany Med. So after our first, right before our first year of medical school, we're required to do a summer of research then, and also the summer after our first year, we're also required to do research at Albany Med. And so these are all times that we focus on one project that we've been working on since our last year at RPI, and hopefully that can lead to a publication. But most of the times it leads to at least a thesis presentation, and that thesis presentation is equivalent to a master's. So it is a really research heavy program, and that really helps push students on to hopefully in future pursue careers as a physician scientist, where they both work at the bedside and also on the bench as well. And so it helps provide the skills at least to help write a grant and also write research reports as well.
Oh, that was a lot. I'll talk about Siena's program. Like Jonathan mentioned, it is one of the Albany Med feeder programs, but the focus of the Siena program is on service. So between the third and fourth year, or I guess the junior and senior year at Siena in undergrad, we will we get to go on a 6 to 8 week service trip to like a third world country, fully funded by Siena. And that's like the key part of our program. Unfortunately wasn't able to go on my trip because of COVID. But then once you get to medical school, between your first and second year, so the summer I'm currently in, we are required to do a summer of service project in which we work with the community to do a health needs assessment with a certain patient population. And like how the RPI program has kind of like helps feed into like a distinction research, the Siena program helps feed into a distinction in service, which also entails like a thesis. So it's equivalent to like getting a master's in like a service. I'm not sure what it'd be called in real life, but that's sort of the focus on that Siena has and how it's different than RPI.
All right, so let's keep going with the questions then. If you were given the choice again, would you guys still choose a BSMD program? Why or why not? Go on about, I guess, your undergraduate experience. Did you miss things that I guess you would have had in a regular experience? Do you enjoy the fact that you go to the current medical school that you do, or would you have like, enjoyed going to a different school maybe if you had the chance to apply instead of doing, I guess, this linked program?
So I guess I can start. So to answer the first part, I'm definitely glad that I did a BSMD program. I guess for me, and I think for probably most people who, or pretty much everyone who gets into these programs, you're academically very strong, right? But like, I feel like developing yourself socially is like just as important, if not more important, than developing yourself academically to have a successful career in medicine. And a lot of times, like those types of activities that help you develop yourself socially might not be like the most like resume boosting activities. So I think for me, not having to worry about applying to med school while I was an undergrad freed up a lot of time for me to have other experiences that I think at the end of the day would make me a better doctor. So yeah, I definitely don't regret it. And I also, I mean, I had a lot of friends from high school that are also now in medical school that didn't do BSMD programs, and I kind of saw them like stress out throughout undergrad and struggle through that whole process. So I was definitely glad that I didn't have to also go through that.
I'm also very glad that I chose to go through a BSMD route. Like John V said, it takes a lot of the stress off. I also have friends from high school who are now currently applying to med school. They took a gap year after undergrad, and then so they're applying during their second gap year, which means that if they get accepted during this cycle, they'll be starting, they'll be a first year while I'm a third year. And so the reality is that like medicine's it's a long journey before you become like a practicing physician. And so like delaying it by 2 years or even by 1 year, taking a gap year is a lot of time. And if you have like certain goals outside of medicine in your personal life that you have to put on, you have to like weigh whether you want to put it on hold in order to pursue medicine or not. But with the BSMD program, that allows us to sort of like know that where we're going to be after 4 years and after 8 years, and be able to plan out certain things a little bit easier.
I think I've seen the same question asked a couple times now. Did you guys have college counselors when you were applying to college and med school? Or did you use some other methods, things like that? I guess describe your application process for everyone here.
Okay, let me answer the previous question first, and then I answer the question about college counselors. So again, I'm not gonna say anything particularly new compared to what John V and Michael said. I think I agree 100% with what they said about not having any regrets. I mean, one of the big things that I think I'm not sure if John mentioned or John and Michael mentioned it, was that there's no MCAT required for these programs in most instances. So it does vary. Some programs do require the MCAT, but the score usually is not very high if they do require it for their students. But for at least for the RPI and all the AMC programs, there was no requirement in terms of MCAT, which again made things a lot easier because I didn't have to study for that, and I instead focused on things I wanted to do. I mean, I guess one of the things that I wouldn't have done if I was going to a traditional undergrad abroad was I wouldn't have joined Greek life, which is something that I did while at RPI, which Greek life at RPI is not like what you would imagine in the movies or the TV shows. It's very, very different. It's very heavily involved in the social scene at RPI, and it still continues to be. And so again, it's a very, very different depending on what school you go to. But I, again, would not have had that opportunity if I was a more traditional student, where I would have definitely focused a lot more on my extracurriculars and my academics while during undergrad. Another thing I think wasn't mentioned was the GPA requirements as well. And so for when you're applying to medical school, in most instances, your GPA has to be above at least a 3.7 or 3.8, ideally above 3.9 if you can. If again, it's not necessarily a must do, but I was looking at, there's like a webpage online that looks at medical school acceptance rates compared to MCAT and GPA scores, and it seems that 3.7, 3.8 is around the cutoff where it begins to the chances of getting into medical school, it can be kind of changed. But in terms of for our programs, though, we only were required to maintain a 3.5 GPA. So again, it's a lot less stress in terms of what we need to do and how we need to academically perform. I think we're still trying our best to learn everything, because what we learn in undergrad helps for medical school, but it is something to keep in mind. And then to go to the question about counselors, so I personally did not use a counselor. I actually just did all my essays at home, and I had family and friends read the essays before I ended up applying. And then I think another question was, how many schools did each of us apply to? In terms of Bsmd programs, I think I applied to about 14 or 15 Bsmd programs, and then I applied to about 4 or 5 outside of that. I was at that time very, very committed to applying to Bsmd programs after doing all the research I wanted to do, and so that's, I think, what I ended up doing.
Yeah, I also did not have a college counselor, and I applied to close to 20 Bsmd programs. I think that was like the limit on Common App. So I think I came close to maxing it out. Of course, like that's very expensive, and I was fortunate enough that my parents were able to support me in my application process. But for my perspective on it, and my parents' perspective was, just cast your net widely, see first off, like what interviews you get, and then where you get in. Because if you go the traditional route, it is going to end up costing a lot more. There are more medical schools than there are Bsmd programs. And so it luckily worked out for us, and I was fortunate to get into the Siena's Bsmd program. But one thing I will add is that what I used instead of a college counselor was I scoured the forums. They have I think it's College Confidential was when I was applying. That was like the website where everyone would go on and post about the Bsmd process, and they have a thread for each year. And so I was on my year's thread, and I would see who was applying, when interviews got sent out, so I can kind of gauge if I got an interview or not to certain programs. And then I also looked at past years forums in order to see what people did. People like to post their resumes on anonymously, with their stats and how many hours and what activities they do, and they're like, chance me. And so you can kind of go back to old years, see what people did, and kind of track them through the forum and see if they got in anywhere. And that kind of helped me kind of gauge myself, figure out what I needed to do, see where I stood in terms of other applicants. And so that kind of took the role of a college counselor for me.
Yeah, like for me too, I also didn't really have a college counselor. And I also used like the online resources like College Confidential, which I will say can be a pretty stress-inducing website, but also has a lot of useful information. And then I also, I guess, like used other resources in my life, like the physician that I had shadowed for a summer. I had him look over my essays. Yeah, so just like finding other mentors in your life, even if it's not a college counselor necessarily. And then in terms of the number of schools I applied to, yeah, around the same number for me too, like 15-ish. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while.
Got it. Thank you guys. And then I have another question here. I think this is a little bit more clarifying about the program in general. This person was asking whether or not the program is double the work because it's combined. I got this in a private message.
So it's not double the work because it's still, you still go like undergrad and then to med school. And if you're in like an 8-year program, it's completely not it's not accelerated at all. So for me, like undergrad, I finished Siena and got my undergraduate degree. Then I started medical school. For RPI and other 7-year programs, I think like BU as well, the undergrad is shortened, so you do have to take a little bit more coursework in order to condense into 3 years. So I think some programs like at BU, I think they make you take some classes during the summer as well. But that of course varies between each program.
Got it. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So in terms of the Bsmd programs, you have a limited option in terms of which medical colleges you end up going to. And some of these may not be the top ranked medical colleges in the nation. Like, unfortunately, I guess that's just kind of how it is. For the programs that do offer a 7-year program, maybe it's not the person's dream #1 school. Does that affect you guys at all in terms of, I guess, your future options or how it feels, I guess, within your current school?
I mean, for me, like at the end of the day, like we're all gonna become doctors, like regardless of what school you go to. So it doesn't really affect me that much, I guess. And also, I think for me, when I was applying and when I was deciding where I wanted to go, location was a little bit more important to me. Like I grew up in Ohio and I didn't really want to be in the Midwest anymore. So I was looking to go to one of the coasts. So yeah, I think that was a little more important to me.
Yeah, so it's true, right? Like Albany Med isn't Harvard or Stanford. But there's a bunch of ways you can like look at the situation. I choose to look at it like I'd rather be a big fish in a small pond than be a small fish in a big pond, you know. And like if I went to Harvard, I would probably be at the bottom of the class, which wouldn't help my chances at residency. And so I don't think that that like the med schools with the Bsmd programs are like bad med schools, right? Like ones that you shouldn't go to. I think they're good. They're solid mid-tier programs. And the reality is if you went the traditional route, you know, it's so competitive. You probably wouldn't get to go to an Ivy League. UCs are going to be a far shot. You're probably going to have out of state anyways. So that's why like I was perfectly content with going to Albany Med and applying to Bsmd programs.
Michael being very direct there, but yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't regret it at all. I mean, again, we put in less. We were able to have a more kind of relaxed undergrad and still have the opportunity to obtain an MD. And especially for me, the RPI Bsmd program, in terms of its focus on research, something that I really appreciated and something that I like about the program. And so for me, that again was a very attractive feature to the program. It kind of even pushed me further to commit to the school.
Do you guys have any advice, I guess, for the high school students in this call right now about, I guess, deciding whether or not the Bsmd program is the right choice for them? Because I know personally I considered the path and I decided it wasn't the right choice for me because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a doctor. And I think that's a very scary thing as like a 17 or 18-year-old going into college. Do you guys have any advice for people in terms of deciding whether this is the right path? And also, I guess in terms of the application process, how to come across, I guess, that you are that person who wants to be in that kind of role.
Well, I would say first and foremost, you want to be 100% sure that you want to go into medicine. It sucks if I realized I didn't want to become a doctor and I'd gone to Siena College, which is, in Albany, New York. I'm a kid from California. I went all the way across the coast to this tiny liberal arts college, realized I don't want to do medicine. Then, it's hard to change trajectories that sort of late into a college career. But I will say that if you think that you are interested in medicine, you do like the idea of a Bsmd program, then, gearing up and getting a resume ready to apply will help you figure out if you want to become a doctor, right? Because you got to do all the shadowing. So you'll learn what it's like to be a doctor. You'll get that experience. You'll do research, which is what we all have to do in med school. And you'll do this community service as well. So you kind of, by like preparing for a Bsmd application, you do sort of, you will have to figure out whether or not you want to become a doctor, and you get those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Michael said. And I think that like if you have doubts about whether you want to become a doctor, which there's nothing wrong with having doubts about that at the age of 17, like I wouldn't focus on Bsmd programs at that point. Because I mean, most people in med school did not go through the Bsmd route. So it's definitely by no means that you like can't do it later on. But in terms of deciding whether you do want to do Bsmd, I think shadowing is definitely the best way. Like for me, at least, that was what really solidified it for me. So yeah.
I agree with what they both just said, and I think another big thing is I think it's very practical as well. Bsmd programs, it makes it a lot easier on yourself. And if you know you want to be a doctor and you were like, it's something that you dreamed of your entire life, I mean, it helps cut to the chase a little bit faster, I feel like, and it saves a lot of effort. So I think that's something to consider as well. Is like I think the biggest thing is like if you have any doubts in any form, I don't think Bsmd programs are the best bet for you, and that it's best to go to undergrad or go to some form of schooling before you decide whether or not you want to pursue it, because in most instances you are locked in, but you can get out of the program. But again, for someone like Michael or myself or John V, we'd be in Albany, New York, and we decided that we didn't want to go to med school anymore. And I mean, it'd be very far from home for all of us. So it's something to consider as well.
And also one other thing I will add is for shadowing. Sorry, I like totally lost my train of thought. Never mind.
All right, let's talk tuition now. So can you guys just, I guess, talk about what tuition numbers are like for you guys in terms of financial aid? What do you get? Because I think Michael and Jonathan, you guys are both from California. What is that out-of-state tuition like for you? And what kind of financial aid options are offered towards you guys?
I want to say that most of the Bsmd programs are through like private colleges. And so in those cases, there wouldn't be like an in-state or out-of-state tuition difference. And most likely just be more expensive than public universities. But for me at Siena, I received a scholarship. Everyone in the program got a scholarship. So it came out to be about, I think, 35,000 to 40,000 each year for Siena, and it goes up to like 70,000 at Albany Med. And so I think when I read in the question, yeah, so my parents did help support me partially, and I had help from the scholarship, but you know, at the end of the day, med school is very expensive, so I do have some federal loans out.
It'll help answer that as well. So I'm also from California, which I think it seems like the question asker is probably from California. But RPI, as Michael mentioned, is a private school. Same with Albany Med. Albany Med is also a private school as well. It's not a New York State school, so the tuition is a little bit on the pricier side to go to Albany Med. But again, most medical schools are pretty pricey in general now at this point in time. Of course, there are a few schools doing full scholarships like NYU, but we're not NYU yet. Hopefully, we'll be there at some point. But in terms of RPI, I paid about $35,000. So I think if you were like initial pocket cost, like like what they bill you as is like $76,000, but I was able to get about $40,000 in scholarships. So that's something that a lot of, I would say, for these private schools, these Bsmd students, they generally give pretty large scholarships to these students because they're usually pretty academically like excelling students, and so for them, rewarding students with usually a lot of times these are all merit-based scholarships. It's pretty nice. But another big tip I really want to mention though is that when you're applying to colleges, not just for Bsmd programs, but in general, when you get your financial aid package, you can always appeal for more money. They can never give you less than what they already give you. So if you ask for more, in some instances they can almost always give more. So I mean, for at least when I was at RPI, what I did was that I actually when I was applying, they gave me I think initially $30,000. I was like, this is still a little bit more expensive than going to UC Berkeley, UCLA. Is there any way you can help at least make up the difference? And then they gave an extra $10K a year actually because of that, after I emailed them my financial aid package from Berkeley. So that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand that you can do, and I think is a fact that it should be known for a lot of people, so that individuals can get the best financial aid package when you go to college.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like I also went to RPI and they gave me a scholarship too. And RPI is pretty good about that. You don't even, sometimes like they'll just give you a scholarship without you even like applying for one or anything like that. And then for med school, I have loans, but there are also scholarships you can apply to in med school. So like I applied to one recently that I should hear back from in the next few weeks. So hopefully I get that. And then I remember what I was going to say earlier. So just, I guess, going back to the previous question about deciding on Bsmd programs. So if becoming a doctor is something you've been thinking about for like your whole life, it's easy to have kind of like confirmation bias in high school and like only look at the good parts. But one thing that helped me make my decision is like, okay, like thinking about what is like the worst possible day I could have as a doctor, and am I willing to have days like that, like, or do the good parts outweigh the bad parts?
Okay. Since we are running out of time here, I'm gonna start combining the questions, and you guys can just give me a little bit shorter answers, I guess. So let's talk about in terms of school life. What's the campus like at RPI and at Albany Med? Is it safe? Is there good food? Things like that. Like, I guess, is dorm food okay? Are the dorms nice? And in terms of extracurriculars, what kind of options are available, and like how much time do you have outside of courses? And can you get a minor during these times?
All right, I'll go fast for RPI. RPI is mostly an engineering school, so there's a lot. One thing to keep in mind that some people don't mention online about RPI is that it is a 70-30 ratio. It is 70% male and 30% female. So keep that in mind when you go to RPI. But otherwise, I really enjoyed the school life at RPI. 3 years is plenty of time, at least I think on the cusp of plenty of time and not enough time, but so I think it's just right. in terms of timing for us to experience all of student life, also pursue research, pursue volunteering, pursue whatever you kind of are interested in. 3 years is a decent amount of time. I think the only one downside for us is that we were in the year of COVID. So our second half of my last year RPI, which is my junior year, I spent all at home. So it was a little unfortunate. I had planned a lot of activities and things to do during my last year RPI, but it was cut short. But overall, I think it was a really great experience. And in terms of dorm food and things like that, the food at RPI initially when we first came freshman, sophomore year, not the greatest, I'll put it that way. For me, I was okay with it, but I know a lot of my friends, and I think John B's in that same boat, did not like the food at RPI. But during our third year, they had a renovation on campus. And so all the dining halls, all the student union got changed. So they added a lot of different food options. And I think from what I hear now, it's a little bit better. And I think it's a little bit kind of better quality food, but I can't be for sure about that. And in terms of dorm situation, you're required to live on campus for your first 2 years at RPI. Freshman housing is freshman housing. I mean, it's not nothing amazing, but nothing bad either. I think it's very comparable to a lot of other colleges, but you do get a lot of space in the rooms. I remember very, very vividly that my at least freshman year dorm room for me and my roommate was actually quite large. We had a lot of space, and so we had plenty of kind of area for all that. And then I guess I think that one of the questions that was there. Was it safe? So RPI's campus itself was very safe, but on the surrounding communities, it was sometimes it can be a little bit unsafe at times. It's mostly in the community down the hill. RPI is on a hill itself, and the community down the hill is a little bit unsafe. That's usually only at night. In the day, it's pretty fine there at RPI, I would say. In most instances, as long as you use your brain and kind of think about, oh, it's 2 a.m., I probably shouldn't go outside at this time, is I think a very good sense of safety and things like that would help you, and you usually don't run into any situations in that sense.
Jonathan pretty much covered anything I can say about RPI. The only thing I'll add, as one of the 30% of RPI students who's female, I joined a sorority, and it felt fine. It felt normal after that.
So for Siena, I will say that I appreciated how safe it was. It's a small community. It's a small campus. It's got everything is on campus. You don't have to walk around the city. It's its own little community, and we are allowed 4 years of on-campus housing, right? So if you think about traditional UCs or other public schools, by your third year, fourth year, or even during your sophomore year, you got to find off-campus housing, signing leases, and all that annoying stuff to do as a 19-year-old. But at Siena, we were housing was never an issue. The housing was fine. The food was great. And I think someone also asked about minors. At Siena, we're actually required to do a minor in the liberal arts. So I did mine in philosophy, but you are allowed to pursue other minors as well. I also picked up one in computer science. So that also shows how much time you do have to, take other classes or do other things, other extracurriculars, especially since Siena is service-based. So they expect you to, and they give you that time to go volunteer and do service. I forget if there was any other questions for me to answer there. Yeah.
All right, everyone. So since we are out of time, I'm going to stop taking new questions at this point, and we're just going to answer the ones that have already been asked. So let's go back. Let me scroll up real quick and see what else has been offered. Do you guys know what kind of classes you took during high school in preparation for college? I guess this might also go into a little bit of what APs or IBs you guys took, things like that. Also, if you guys took any classes outside of high school, at a community college or something.
I can start off with this one. So, I mean, any of all the AP sciences are pretty much, I think we all took them, or IB too. And then in terms of, so my high school had a human anatomy and physiology class. I know a lot of high schools don't have that, but if your high school offers it, it's a great class to take in high school. because when we had our college anatomy and physiology class, I actually like already knew a lot of it from high school, which was nice. And then my high school had a thing where during your senior year, you could take classes at Ohio State. So I did that. And at the time, it felt like it was so important to do. But now looking back, it wasn't really that, and it didn't make or break my application at all. So do it if you want to, if you're like running out of classes to take at your high school, but it doesn't really make much of a difference in the long term.
Yeah, same. I just took whatever AP classes that were available at my high school, and I didn't take anything outside of my high school.
Yep, just took a lot of AP classes, as many as I could healthily fit into my schedule.
Did any of you guys live in the dorms with people from the program, or did you guys like move into an apartment with those kind of people? Or did you live with people who were outside of the program entirely, things like that? I guess in terms of just socially.
Go first. I lived with someone not in the program because I was like, I'm gonna spend 7 years with these people. I want to meet some other people as well. So I lived with a few other people, and I actually made my roommate from freshman year and a bunch of other friends from my residence hall that year are actually still my current friends right now. We still keep in contact, and we actually hang out whenever we can. So I think that was a smart decision. But again, I think there's a lot of different philosophies around that, depending on how you feel.
Yeah, so for all of college, I guess, I lived with people in the same program. And I liked it. I mean, I feel like I was able to become like very close with them since, you know, we were taking the same classes and we were living together. So that was nice. But then also making sure that you have friends outside of the program is also very important. So like when I joined my sorority, I moved into the sorority house, and my roommate in the sorority house was also in the same program as me. So like we were close. But then like obviously there were other people in the house who were completely different majors. So it was nice to get a variety.
Yeah, the first 2 years of undergrad, I lived with someone in the program, and the last two I lived with other friends. They're both great situations to be in. It's honestly just personal preference. I don't think you can really go wrong with either.
All right. So for follow-up questions, if you guys have any more questions, we can't answer them right now, unfortunately, because there's a little bit of a time constraint. Can you all redirect questions to Kathy Fun Dance Club? And also, as a reminder, if you can, please donate towards their programs, so that way they can continue to host programs like these and also their dance programs. One or two other questions. Let's see. So do you guys know if hospitals favor people who went through traditional medical careers or people who did the Bsmd, or is there pretty much no difference?
I don't think they can even really like see that on our application, whether we did a Bsmd program or not, unless they already know of the program and like look really specifically at the year that we graduated high school, I guess, or like look at the years and do the math. But yeah.
Yeah, once you get to Albany Med, you are basically treated as like, or when you apply to residencies, they don't know that you did a Bsmd program. I don't think it hurts at all. If the only thing would be that it might help you if like you apply to a place that has like that knows of the Bsmd program or has like current residents who went through the program. It helps make a connection, but I don't think it could really hurt.
All right. Let's see. I think there was one last question. I think some of the other ones were already answered previously. So if you guys didn't hear those answers to those questions, feel free to look at the recording later. I think one last question. What's the graduation rate for Bsmd people, I guess? And if you choose not to continue with the program, how would you do so?
I think so, at least in my mind. So graduation rate's nearly 100%, at least from what I recall. There, of course, are people who drop out, or also, I mean, due to grades, may not make it through. But at least for a lot of programs, they're quite high. At least above 80 to 90%, I would say that we're in that range. And then for students who don't end up deciding to choose to go through medical school, they can usually just notify the program director, and then you also have to notify Albany Med that I will not be pursuing my medical degree at Albany Med. And then they usually just transfer you to a traditional undergrad student at the university in most instances.
Yeah, I don't think there's like any like legal proceedings or anything where like you're not allowed to drop out of a Bsmd program. I think historically, if there is a student who doesn't complete the Bsmd program, it was because of his or her own choice. Like they decided that they didn't want to go on to med school. These programs aren't designed to like cut people off or weed anyone out. All the requirements are crystal clear. So as long as you follow like the GPA requirement or an MCAT requirement, if there is one, they don't try to trick you or anything.
All right. Thank you three so much for your time and for answering all of these questions. All follow-up questions should be directed towards Kathy Fun Dance. And as a reminder, one more time, if you can, please donate towards them, as they are the ones hosting this, and giving you guys the opportunity, I guess, to speak in an interview with these three medical students. And I hope you guys learned a lot. And thank you all for coming and for your time.